Welcome to Chat with the Lawyer. I'm your host, Walla Blagay, and today we are honored to have Attorney Wayne Sprauve, an international commercial lawyer, who is going to talk about what business owners should consider when looking to expand internationally. And this is really important. I know many business owners watch this show and are looking at business beyond United States, and we have an expert here that's going to give great advice on that issue. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on our show.
My pleasure.
All right. So tell us, how did you get to this point where you were advising international business?
Well, I've always been interested in international relations. And after I finished law school, I was assistant counsel to the governor of the Virgin Islands. And to the extent that it is part of the United States, it also has a lot of business and functions internationally. So I've had to go to the Far East to try and look for investment opportunities. And while the law is a very good foundation for understanding what needs to be done, having some sort of a commercial background also helps you to sensitize the practice to the needs of the average business person. Because when you make the decision to go overseas, it isn't something that you can do just at the flip of the bat. It is something you have to do subsequent to adequate research, consulting the right resources, and making sure that the decision you make is in fact in the company's best interest. And that's the operative term there. The move, the decisions have to be in the company best interest and by extension in your stakeholders' best interest.
And just to ask now, if you, now in your practice, have you represented companies that have gone all over the world, or is there a particular continent outside of the United States that you're focused on?
Well, you find that as you leave the US mainland, a lot of companies have footprints in various geographic areas. My expertise is the African continent or the emerging market environment. And why that is very important is because you have to focus on whether or not there's a system or rule of law in place. For example, if you have a problem on a contract, can you sue for breach? Can you go for temporary restraining order, some sort of legal relief in the event your investment is threatened? If you don't have a legal system in place that gives you that capability, you need to really think about whether or not you want to invest substantial amount of monies in that sort of environment. Because you have to have some knowledge of the local law, you have to have some knowledge of international law, and of course, if you're an American-based company, you'd better know what US law is. Because in many of these countries, giving a bribe, as an example, is part and parcel of doing business. As an American business person, you're subject to the Foreign Corrupt Practice Act, which prohibits you from doing that. And the penalties are very steep. So oftentimes, American business people find themselves at a disadvantage in an environment where a bribe facilitates the business that you're trying to get, particularly our counterparts in Europe, where it's not a big issue if they can give a bonus or an incentive to get a particular contract of work. As Americans, we are forbidden by that particular act of Congress from doing that, and oftentimes we lose out on business opportunities because of that.
That's a good point. We should probably go into that, but let's step back and go into like a simpler form, because we don't have the capability of having people come and call in, but I have encountered so many people looking at international opportunities and not thinking about legal implications. So, for example, there are people that meet somebody, let's just say since you have focused on Africa, they might be interested in a rice growing business, and maybe they've done some agricultural work in the United States, but they meet someone that is African or Nigerian, let's just say, and they say, well, I have a rice business company, so how about we partner, and I make the rice, I send it to you, you could sell it throughout the United States, and we can partner.
That's a very common relationship.
So go with what now? If I'm the person that initiating that, what do I need to do?
Well, you need to first of all always research the person you're getting involved with, and that research is not based on word of mouth. You've got to see what experience they've had in the business, what references you can get from established institutions, from banks, from accountants, Don't be afraid to touch bases. I always touch bases with the U.S. Embassy, the commercial attaché. They often have access to some local information that they can share with you as an American citizen. And you need to really find out, get some references, examples of past performance in this particular type of business. You need to get a feeling of whether or not the person understands and appreciates what the expectations are. Because oftentimes when you walk in as an American, there are expectations, and oftentimes they're unrealistic. The perception is they're an emerging economy, you're from a first world environment, you're coming with cash, you're going to give the cash to them, they're going to do the work, and then they're going to report to you at the end of that exercise. And oftentimes that's not the case. You need to be able to monitor how your funds are going to be used. There needs to be some system of accountability. You've got to make sure that the accountants that are being used are established accountants, that the bank is in fact a legitimate bank. That's very important, and that you have the ability to repatriate your profits at the conclusion of the business. Because if you can't take your money out of the country and you need your money back in the US or somewhere else, then it becomes a problem. Sometimes they allow you to take money out of the country, but in such small amounts that it'll take you forever to get your money out of the country. So you need to be able to know, going in, what are the laws with regards to repatriation of your investment amounts. Very important.
So going into that, now if I decide I'm going to partner with this person and they sell all this rice and now I have thousands of dollars that's in Nigeria that I need to get over, is it taxed? How do you report it? I mean, can I just pick up the cash and get on a plane and come to the United States?
Well, no, you cannot, because they have exchange laws in many of these countries that control just how much money you can take out of the country. I know, for example, in South Africa, you need to report to the Reserve Bank how much money you've actually invested in a project, so that when you're taking money out of the country, it's not a problem. Because if you hadn't report that you brought this money in and you look to take large sums of money out, they'll put a hold on it at the Reserve Bank, and it doesn't come out of the country until a thorough investigation, which can take months. So you need to really know what the specific laws are to the specific country with regards to tax, whether or not you have any sort of tax exemptions, whether you have applied for any special economic benefits as an investor, and then you have to also deal with your tax obligation on the US side. So what you try to do is create a scenario where the entity that's doing the business in the foreign country really is operating under its own tax profile, so you're not taxed doubly. There's no double taxation. You really need to take the time to understand the tax consequences, and you need to understand what are your safety and security measures are in place. Because you may go and invest in a place and there's a coup tomorrow, there's some political instability. Is your investment insured? Is it guaranteed? What kind of remedies available to you? For example, the World Bank has MIGA, Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, which in the event of political instability, you can recoup some of your investment. So you need to go in with these sort of guarantees and not just going blindly or romantically. Like a lot of times you go to Africa and they say, hey, my brother, I know the president. From the time they say, I'm the president's brother, I'm the president, because your flag should go up. Because you're now operating out of the normal course of business. You're operating now based on personal relationship as opposed to acceptable business principles. So one has to be very, very careful and apply the same checks and balances as you would do here. There, in some instances, you need to be a little more stringent about how you conduct your business.
Interesting. So let's go into maybe another scenario. Now, let's just say I meet someone that say that they're a king or a queen in a particular town, and they want to give me gold or diamonds. And they say, look, you could just take it, meet with us, we'll have a whole ceremony, we'll give it to you, you can bring it back to your country, to the United States. Now, is there any issues there?
There are several issues there. I had a particular example where a tribal chief entered into an agreement with a client of mine to sell chrome. And he wanted a certain amount of money for the chrome. The fact of the matter is the chrome did not belong to the chief himself. It belonged to the tribal authority. So there needed to be a resolution authorizing the sale of that chrome. So the funds that were turned over to the chief were lost because he never turned them over to the tribal authority, and the client never got their chrome because there was no authority to take the chrome off the property. So the fact that an individual may be a chief or a king or some royal person, they don't have carte blanche to do whatever they want to do with the natural resources. Usually anything that is in the earth is owned by the state. The mineral rights are owned by the state. There has to be some concession agreement that then gives those rights to a particular person to exploit or explore that particular mineral. So you have to be very careful, particularly in minerals in Africa and places that are mineral rich, and understand that the mere fact that a person is a member of a royal family or even a member of government, they do not have carte blanche authority to simply give you gold or give you diamonds to take out of the country. Everything at this stage in the majority of the countries are very closely regulated, and you risk having your purchase designated as illegal, or in the case of diamonds, a blood diamond. If you don't have a Kimberley certificate stating that the transaction meets the requirements of the Kimberley process, you'll have problems bringing it into the US. It may very well be confiscated at the borders without the proper Kimberley certificates. So you have to be very careful.
And one of the follow-up I have questions is, how do you determine what it's really worth? Now, if you get gold or diamonds from someone, they sell you it's worth this. Now, how would you be able to, because wouldn't you have to report that for taxing purposes, the worth of the diamond or gold? So how do you go about doing that?
It's the same as any commodity. You're taxed based on the revenue, on the monies that the revenues that are generated from that product. Whether it's diamond, whether it's gold, whether it's furniture, whether it's timber, it's based on the revenues that you're taxed based on your revenue base. Now, your question is very appropriate and timely because, as you know, in West Africa, there are a number of people involved in the precious stones business. And in a lot of the countries, they're able to mine the commodity. They don't have the resources, the money to export it. So what they would tell you is to pay for the export licenses and the export fees, which are substantial. And then you can reclaim the gold in your country and you can deduct your investment from the sale of the goods. That becomes problematic when the goods get to the destination and they are not real goods. So you saw real gold, you tested real gold. You saw diamonds, you tested real diamonds. You agreed with them to take it over to the transporter, the shipper. You agreed to pay the fees, the funds, the licenses to export from the country. But when it gets to the destination and it is checked, it isn't diamonds. It's not the real thing, it's a fake. You've just lost your money. So you've got to find established companies like Brinks or one of the others, where you do the transaction in-house on the premises and then it is sealed, and you know that what you've just sealed and signed to is exactly the real thing. You have to have your gemologist there to check the process along the way that the stuff isn't switched, because there are a lot of people who are very adept at defrauding. So you've got to make sure you know who you're dealing with and have someone on your position who can verify that the product you've paid for is the actual product that's being shipped.
Well, thank you so much for this great information. We are going to take a short break and we're going to come back and go more into various scenarios that many of you business owners have encountered in international business. Well, thank you for joining us.
So who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice. And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
We couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
Welcome back to Chat with the Lawyer, and I'm here with Attorney Wayne Sprauve talking about business owners looking into international business or international commercial business. So let's go back into some of the things we were discussing, because we really were able to dig deep into some of the issues. And so another scenario that I wanted to talk about now, there is a lot of people are seeing that there's value in a lot of the African, like we talk about natural resources, and something like shea butter has been growing. The interest has been growing, and I know a lot of people that are actually getting shea butter from those in villages. And what should they be thinking of? Because these aren't diamonds and golds. This is a much more natural product, and they're going to make sure that they can distribute it in the U.S. They just need the natural products.
Well, I think you have to make sure that what you're getting, what is the content or the ingredient, where is it coming from, how has it been stored, are there any side effects, are you specifying what the use is the use simply external, are you going to be mixing with something for internal consumption? You've got to take into consideration, if it's introduced to the American public, have you adequately explained its uses, put your disclaimers, and let them know that it has not been FDA tested and all this sort of stuff, because we're a very litigious society. And someone can apply this butter in a normal way and they end up with some sort of a reaction, and then you have a liability issue. So the basic thing is that you don't over-represent or misrepresent the product or its usage. You'd have some people in the past that said, oh, if you bring this bush from this village in Africa, it cures AIDS. You don't go based on what the village doctor says. You go based on what FDA and the American institutions governing the use of products in the American society say about that. Because you can be charged with misrepresentation, and you can get in some serious trouble. Just keep it simple. This is what it is. This is what it's been used for. We make no guarantees that it does A, B, or C. Keep it simple. And to the extent that it may have some agricultural impact, you have to check with the Department of Agriculture to make sure that you're not bringing anything that's on a list of things not to be brought into the U.S. So all I'm saying is, in fact, do your research, ask questions of, and all this information is readily available on the internet. So do your research before you just jump into any sort of relationship, and make sure that you put things in writing. Even if you're dealing with the village, you should still have a contract. I know some people in the eastern part of the Congo, Bukavu, that were selling gold, and they were not supporters of the president of the country, who was in the capital, Kinshasa. So people were going there and buying the gold from them and simply flying it out of the airport there to Dubai, to the refinery. Well, the fact of the matter is you need an export to export that commodity out of the country. So you have to look at what the codified laws are, what the established laws are, and not listen to what the business guy in the ground tells you. He's trying to sell the product. He knows you have money. He wants to do a market exchange very quickly. But you've got to be aware of the consequences of taking anything out of the country that can be described or construed as a natural resource, because a majority of the African countries have laws governing that. If they catch you taking stuff out of the country without the necessary permit, there's going to be serious consequences. You may very well lose your investment. You may very well be put on a list so that the next time you come into the country, your only call that you may be given is to the American ambassador. So
and you've had clients that have had that?
Well, I've certainly been in a situation where I had to call the embassy.
Wow.
Yeah. So you want to just be very careful. Don't be over anxious about anything. Africa, as you know, is replete with resources. If you lose one deal, you'll find another. There's not just, the way they sell things to you, this is the best deal you're going to get. This is the best deal you're going to get. Well, there's always a better deal. If you feel uncomfortable about something, sometimes you use your sixth sense. You use that inner instinct that you have. It doesn't feel right. If it doesn't feel right, walk away.
That's interesting.
Walk away.
So another thing that also comes up is that, let's just say I am a tech person and I know how to make these really good phones that would do well throughout Africa. I feel that if I am able to make them here, I have the resources here to make them, I can take them all over West Africa or even throughout the continent and sell them. So what should I be thinking of then if I'm...
Again, look at the laws governing telecommunications in the specific country. Let's say you have cell phones that are GSM, cell phones that are unblocked and can be used in any GSM system. You just need to know what the laws are for importing that product to the country. Because in Africa, like most emerging markets, you have the formal economy and then you have the informal economy. A lot of Chinese products are simply dumped into Africa and they're sold in the informal or the second economy. You go to market, you see the market women with their phones here, or wherever it is. It doesn't mean that they necessarily got these phones from licensed or legitimate people, because when you're at that level of the economy, at that level of society, you're concerned about functionality and practicality. You're not always necessarily concerned about legality. So you now being an exporter to that country, you want to be concerned about legality because the institutions in that state can sue you in a federal court in the United States. So your objective is to avoid all this stuff. Again, do your research, find a lawyer there if you can afford one who specializes in that particular area, telecommunications and licenses. Invest the money to have them do a thorough research and a recommendation onto how you should proceed in penetrating that particular market and getting your product in there. And basically go based on that advice and commercial advice. And again, look at the commercial services. The United States Department of, I think it's the United States Department of Commerce, has a commercial service. In some instances, it's in the embassy or it's in the city. They're very good at providing that service for you, giving an idea about the kinds of businesses and institutions and who you should go to and so forth and so on. You may also check with the commercial attaché at the American Embassy and ask questions. But the resources are there for you to make an informed decision before you embark on a project of such magnitude and such potential liability. In everything you do from a business perspective, you've got to consider the potential liability to the business. In Africa, if you're dealing with things like diamonds and gold and all the wonderful things that excite us, you have to consider your personal liability, because you'll get yourself in a situation you could lose your life if you don't do your research. So one has to tread very carefully. Don't be anxious about anything. If the deal goes, another one will come. Do your homework and tread carefully.
Interesting. Now, there are other people, especially in the district, in this area, in Prince George's County, that do a lot of consulting. And I know a lot of people have come to me and say, well, I've been asked to do consulting for this and that business in Africa, and I'm going to travel there to do some consulting. Now, if that person has a consulting business in the United States, and then now they're going overseas, even throughout Europe and South America, what should they be considering?
Well, first of all, that you have a competency in the area in which you're consulting. And quite often I find, particularly in Africa, an individual may do a research paper at a university and then goes and presents that they're an expert in Africa. Or they may have done something 300 years ago in Africa and they now want to go and say they're a competent person in that field. One has to be very careful. Africa, like any other society, on the ground, the dynamics are not static. They are fluid, they're moving, they change. So things change 2-3 years. You have to be up to date on your information, and you've got to be careful that the information you're given actually is based on your personal knowledge, your experience, and what actually is happening on the ground. I think where we make a lot of mistakes is we do research and then we make decisions, and then after we get there we realize that the variables we used have changed. You can't talk about an economy, a society, a country unless you've gone there, unless you may have lived there for a short period of time or worked there. That's where you're able to absorb the full impetus of the social variables to be able to make an informed decision about what is or what is not. And you have to be very careful about that. There's nothing wrong with a person going to represent a client in a consultative mode. But when you start talking about a specific African country in terms of the dynamics, in terms of the economy, in terms of the legal system, you have to be very careful about how you inform your client, especially if your client is not from that country. Because their laws are changing, the society is changing, the variables are changing, the banking laws are changing, exchange rates and exchange laws are changing, and you just have to stay on top of that to make sure that the information that you give your client really benefits the client.
Okay. And so if I decide to consult throughout Africa and then people find that I'm not quite the consultant that I claim to be, and they want to sue me. They want to sue me because they spent all this money. Could they come to the American courts and sue me?
Of course.
In what court?
They'll bring it in federal court. It can be breach, it can be misrepresentation. If you happen to be a lawyer, there can be a complaint filed with the Bar Association that you're a member of. If you claim to be a lawyer and you're not, there's unauthorized practice of law. There are a whole heap of things that they can do. Unlike other countries where it may be difficult for you to launch a lawsuit for misrepresentation or fraud or whatever it is, it's very easy in the United States. So really and truly you want to make sure, again, if you're doing contractual work, that you spell out specifically what are the parameters of the work you're doing, that you don't promise the stars and deliver only the clouds, that you say what it is you're going to do, and that you're not going to do anything else. And should they want any additional work, that should be included in a subsequent contract or your contract should be modified. Very important for you to do that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on this show. This has been really good, and I'm sure this business owners watching this are going to appreciate your advice. Now, if they want to contact you so that you can assist them in going through the process, how would they contact you?
Well, they could contact me through you.
All right.
So it begins. I think that's the best way for them.
Okay.
They get hold of you, then you can get hold of me.
All right. Well, if you want to get in touch with Attorney Sprauve, or you also want to see some of our other shows, you can check it out on our website, www.chatwiththelawyer.tv, and you can send us a message or request a lawyer or even watch some of our other shows. And thank you for joining us.
This is Ban Bossy. Take one.
Pushy. Stubborn. Stubborn. Pushy.
Pushy.
Stubborn. Stubborn. Bossy. 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 Bossy.
When I was growing up, I was called bossy.
I think the word bossy is just a swasher.
Being labeled something matters. By middle school,
Girls are less interested in leadership than boys.
And that's because they worry about being called
Bossy.
We need to tell them it's okay to be ambitious.
we need to help them lean in
words matter.
Let's just ban the word bossy.
and encourage girls to lead.
To be strong and be ambitious.
Listen to your own voice. There are no limits.
Dare to be you.
You can change the world. Let's ban bossy. Be brave. Be you.
Ban bossy.
Join us to ban bossy.
I'm not bossy. I'm the boss.
Encourage girls to lead. Take the pledge at banbossy.com.
Why would you bully me?
Why would you bully me?
Why would you bully me?
Because it makes you feel cool? Because I'm different?
Do I touch a nerve?
Does making me feel bad make you feel good?
Why?
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 Bullying hurts. Bullying abuses. Bullying kills. Why would you bully me.